your flesh and blood.
Welcome to Tell Me Your Story. New paradigms for a new world where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here 9 times a week. Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at all those times at richarddugan.com. We are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, as well as YouTube, where you can watch these conversations. I hope that you will take time to subscribe and click notifications so that when a new conversation is posted, you'll be notified and you'll be able to tune in, listen in, and learn, and be entertained and inspired. A reminder that Choices, which is my book, 5 Steps for Life, it's available on Amazon.com in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle with Audible, soon to be released. We also ask that if you can support the work that we are doing financially, we do have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And when they ask for an email address to whom you're sending, please go to richard@richarddugan.com. That's the email address. If you go to richarddugan.com, there is also a link directly to PayPal so that you can send us whatever support you can. And we thank you to those who have helped and to those who will help. We also ask that you take time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still, small voice. And with that, we now take you to our very special interview and guest here on Tell Me Your Story. Welcome to Tell Me Your Story. I am Richard Dugan, and my very special guest here on the program is going to be talking to us about his latest book, A History of Bodies, Brains, and Minds, The Evolution of Life and Consciousness. And Francisco Aboitiz is my guest. Thank you so much. And you're coming to us way down there towards the South Pole, but not that close, in Chile. Thank you for joining us here.
Thanks very much, Richard.
This is going to be interesting because when I was looking over the book and the materials, I was fascinated by this aspect. Evolution is something we talk about quite often on this program because the reality is, no matter how much some people want to disavow the concept of evolution, that's what we do. Why do we go to school? To evolve intellectually. Why are so many people so upset with the lockdown during the 2020, 21, 22 and upsetting the whole social aspects of our children? Well, now you want them to go back to school and get socialized and so forth, which again, I'm not opposed to, but that's an evolutionary process. So we're going to talk about all of the, and then of course, why do some people, they go to the gym, they work out, they do triathlons, they do these monster things, they go to the Olympics, and on and on and on, because they want to, so to speak, evolve their bodies. And some people do incredible types of spiritual work to, I guess it's possible to evolve their souls. And in this case, we're talking consciousness. We're talking of the evolution of life as we know it. So first of all, how about you in your evolutionary process? Can you point to a point in your life where you began to realize, oh, I am evolving as a human?
Yeah, well, yeah. Actually, that's a tricky question, but I think I can tell you the story of my own evolution.
Mm-hmm.
As a child, I was really fascinated by living beings, by animals, insects, whatever, and even plants, because it was really impressive to me the way that they grew, the way that they behave, and the way they have evolved from practically a single cell at some point 4.5 billion years ago, and that I think was my main motivation to start studying the science of life, which is biology. And along this way, I found out that what is the, so to speak, the best achievement of evolution is our brain. You know, our brain is like the most complex thing ever produced by evolution. So I decided to start studying the evolution of the brain, and how we came to get this magnificent organ, you know, which has 80 billion neurons, and the amount of connections you can make with these neurons is an astronomical number. It's even larger than probably all the stars in the universe. So it's really astonishing the complexity that we have in this organ, and that I think that has been the goal I have pursued along my career. Understand the brain, which I don't understand anyway. But I don't think anyone who tells you they understand the brain, they don't.
I was just going to say, I don't think you're alone in that either.
Yeah. Yeah, but just the search of knowing more and learning, that's science. Science is, in a way, is the triumph of ignorance. You know, you recognize you don't know, and you just investigate and do experiments to learn, because you are not. It's different from religion, for example. Religion or dogma, any dogma, political dogmas or whatever, where people say, you know, this is reality, and we have to accommodate to whatever this is. Science does not do that. Science thinks that reality is an unknown, and we have to find out. And that's why theories of science sometimes break down, and new theories arise and all that, because this is a dynamic process. It's evolving, like you said. It's evolving.
Now, we could talk a little bit about the aspect of science. And science is, there are certain elements, I suppose you could say science is an art from that standpoint. But by the same token, there are certain things that we discover as we evolve. I'll be using that word a lot, I'm sure.
Yeah.
As we move forward in time, that the conclusions that science comes to change, because we're able to develop and design equipment that will go farther and deeper than they could have in the 10th, 12th, 14th, 16th centuries, et cetera, et cetera. And we discover things that really, I didn't know that. And you can't argue with it at that moment, because that's as far as we can go. It's like that sign at the end of, now is it at the end of Argentina, not Chile, that says you have reached the end of the world?
No, it has to be Chile.
It's Chile.
Has to be Chile, because Chile is south. It's more south than Argentina.
Yeah. But when you get there, you can't go any further unless you have a boat, something to get into the water and continue traveling south to Antarctica. So it's the same thing with science. They get to that sign and they go, okay, and maybe in about 5 or 10 years, maybe we'll be able to go, we'll be able to build something that'll allow us to walk on the water or float or what have you, and we'll get there, and on and on and on. And yet there are also those who argue that science has an agenda. And I would have to agree, but the definition that I would use would be science does have an agenda. And that agenda is to discover the truths, the reality of what is. You said earlier that science, in essence, says that there's no reality, in the sense that, and this is my understanding from maybe what you've said, because everything is energy. I mean, that which you and I are communicating through, the tabletop that my laptop is sitting on, my laptop, even my physical body, it's just energy. Now, the matter that has been created will eventually dissipate, But it has been said you cannot destroy energy. It just transforms. It just transmute or evolves.
Yeah.
Is that a fair assessment, or could you clarify that, or maybe add your finer points to it?
Uh, I'll give you an example, which is a classical example, the example of classical physics. Isaac Newton, proposed a system in which planets go around the sun, and the planets are attracted to each other, and it worked perfectly well. People say he has been the greatest physicist of all times, because he described how the world lives, how the world works, and it fits our intuition so well. But then again, like you say, new techniques appeared, and they started studying very, very small things,
Yeah.
like the nature of the electron. And they found out that this physics didn't work for that. So you get to that point in which this understanding of the world, you can't go anymore. You have to find something else. It's like going to the south of Chile. This is the end of the world for Newton. Now we have to find another world, which was, quantum mechanics and all that. And with biology, it also happens. For example, the discovery of inheritance and the material that conveys inheritance. Watson and Crick showed the structure of ADN, DNA, sorry. And well, we finally understood how it is that our kids become similar to us, and how biological evolution can take place, because DNA is the basic material of life, so to speak.
Yeah. One of the how do I put this? One of the when I say conclusions that I came to at a very young age is not a hard and fast conclusion, but my understanding, maybe that's a better word, my understanding of the universe is that there's a phrase in some esoteric writings, as above, so below. So if we're studying the universe, let's just take our solar system as an example. And we have our star, we have the 8 or 9, depending upon your perspective, planets.
Yeah,
exactly. And then we take, let's just say, an electron microscope, and we turn it up, way up, so we can get down to the subatomic level. And we see those particles spinning around the nucleus, the electrons, the neutrons, the protons, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought, well, that, though it may be a limited solar system, it sure looks like the one that we happen to be spinning around in. And then you have the galaxy, which is spinning and has those arms, according to a lot of the probes that we've sent out and taken pictures of galaxies, looks like.
Yeah.
It's a slightly different form, but it's similar. So who's to say that maybe they say there are trillions of galaxies in the universe?
Yeah, exactly. Something like that.
How do we know that there aren't multiverses that are also spinning in that same fashion? Kind of like, and maybe this is the best description, kind of like a fractal. I have a wall poster of a fractal. And then I've also seen some videos where what they do is they either go in or they come out.
Yeah.
And it changes a little, but then it looks the same as it just did. And then it changes a little and it looks. So I have to wonder if maybe in the Next Generation Star Trek episode where they trapped Moriarty in this box with enough hard drive space, if you will, for him to last for years, decades, even traveling throughout space. And Data, he's holding the box and he kind of looks away from the box out through the window into space and says, "Computer, end program," as if he is in a hologram? I mean, these are the theories, they are theories that I have thought of, and I know I'm not alone. So I
Yeah.
have to wonder, when we start talking about what is real, what is reality, when you start tossing that into the mix, you're sitting there going, I don't know. You know, we're all trying to understand our place in the universe. Is that kind of where you're coming from with this wonderful writing that you've put together, which I do want to remind our listeners of? It's a history of the bodies, brains, and minds, the evolution of life and consciousness. Is that sort of kind of where you're coming from? It's like we're trying to understand this, even though today we'll say, okay, I understand this much. And tomorrow I might understand more when maybe somebody discovers something else or some other math problem that will elucidate this.
Well, I think, like I told you before, it's like science doesn't care, or it's not like I mean, we will describe reality. What we will do is to find ways of moving through reality. See, our reality is related to our consciousness, because we are conscious. You and me are conscious, I hope. You and me are conscious, and we feel like we are embedded in a space and in a world. We are part of the world, and we're different, but we are part of this world. And this world is what we call reality. But the way, how is this world, is something that we will keep discovering. And what we will do is to find, some rules or some laws or whatever, some principles that enable us to manage ourselves within some context. But then again, if this context changes, maybe you have to find some other rules. We have evolved, like I told you, like 4 point whatever billion years ago, and our brains have evolved to understand the world of 3 dimensions, and in the scale of our bodies, much larger, maybe much, but we didn't evolve to understand how atoms work, because it's far beyond our necessities. So our minds are made to understand the world as it is said in classical physics, because classical physics works pretty well for our survival, and even animals have this, many animals like chimps and some crows and whatever, they do have this understanding, this basic intuition about the laws of physics,
Yeah.
some very basic, but they do have them because it's important for them to survive. For example, an animal has to know whether a twig that is placed there will be able to sustain him when he perches on it. So they must have some knowledge about the world, they live in, and it's the same for us. And actually, I think it's really fascinating that we can understand so much, because we are now understanding things that are far, far beyond from the capacities that we need to survive.
Yeah.
Like you said, from the galaxies to the Big Bang to the structure of the atoms, and even the complexities of biology.
I was talking not too long ago about the concept of chaos and order. I actually helped to produce a series of programs on this program, Tell Me Your Story, that was entitled, the book was actually entitled Chaos to Clarity.
Yeah.
And I got to thinking about that in this context as we are talking here. And one of the other aspects in terms of when I grapple with duality, I mean, we all do, but when I grapple with it, there is no duality. When I look through the Hubble telescope or James Webb and I see the universe unfolding, as Desiderata says, unfolding as it should. What I see is a lot of spinning, as we talked about earlier, a lot of stuff colliding and exploding and creating and destroying and on and on and on. But the universe doesn't judge it as good or bad.
No.
And when we look at it, obviously from a distance, we go, ooh, ah, kind of like when we're watching fireworks.
Yeah.
The same thing happens on a cellular level when we look through that telescope or microscope. Microscope.
Yeah.
And we view the micro universe, or I like it like the microcosm. When we start viewing it, and it does the same kind of thing, and some cells will consume others, and on and on and on and on. But when we start looking at our world, I call it, we have the macrocosmic and the microcosmic, and I call our living space the mid-cosmic.
Yeah.
Where there's judgment, like you couldn't make any money at selling it because it's so prevalent. There's so much judgment over everything that happens at this level.
Yeah.
And my theory is that if we could but take the perspective that we do of the micro and the macrocosmic worlds and imprint it on our world, then we might have a better understanding, because it's that judgment and those emotions that get in the way of the intellect that is wanting to try to understand how and why the universe exists. Your thoughts in that regard? Would that be, do you think that that's part of why we're having so much difficulty these days with science, is because so many people's emotions are tied up in their particular agenda, their philosophy, their belief system, that they just reject science out of hand because it's science, not even because it contradicts what they believe?
Oh, that's basically correct. I mean, and I can tell you, I mean, there's just so many people who not only reject, but they also don't understand science, but they make opinions. And actually, one of the things that I consider that is really worrisome is the spread of these social networks and communications that actually what they do is to facilitate, all this fake news and all this information, but it's information in a way, but it's bad information because it's not, so to speak, true.
Yeah.
Science, well done, like becomes closer to true. At least, for example, we know that vaccines work. Or we know that airplanes fly, and this is that's it's or that the Earth is round,
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's so many people, and there's this trend that I consider very worrisome, that really is rejecting scientific knowledge,
Yeah.
and the scientific method even. And I think this is a sign of our times. Some people like Carl Sagan, for example, he at those times he used to say, that there was a danger on this. But I think at this point, this has become, totally true.
Yeah. We are talking with Dr. Francisco Aboitiz. He is the author of this wonderful new book. You're going to want to get a copy of it, and it is A History of Bodies, Brains, and Minds, the Evolution of Life and Consciousness. And we're going to keep talking about it right here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host here on the program that gives you new paradigms for a new world, choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Dr. Aboitiz, I wanted to ask you in regards to what you were just talking about in terms of the information that is, it's just unbelievable how much information is out there. One of my favorite sayings, and it's rather appropriate at this particular period in time as you and I are talking, a rather famous former president made a statement, and I say this tongue in cheek. He said, I'll tell you who it is after I tell you what he said. He said, never believe anything you read on the internet. His name was Abraham Lincoln. I say it's tongue in cheek, obviously, because this is the month of President's Day, if you will. Abraham Lincoln, born on I believe it was the 12th of February. In any event, and there are those people I've said that to, and they go, "Really? I didn't know he said that." Would you care to double check when he was alive and then tell me if he actually said that? Because people, they don't have any frame of reference. They don't have any points of reference, or they missed that day in class or something. I don't know. But in any event.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about the evolution of life and consciousness, now it's one thing we can sort of measure the evolution of the body and our brains and the mind, as we talked earlier about education and so forth. But when it comes to life, when I look at our process here in the United States, specifically within those borders, what I see, at least on the larger levels of corporate and governmental, religious, and economic, there is no evolution, because they don't want to try anything new. Whereas on we'll call it the civilian level, you and me as civilians, as just people living in our respective countries, we're willing to try something different. And I want you to know that I listen a lot to my wife. When she offers a suggestion, I then process it in my brain, not to accept or reject, but to consider the possibilities on how that may actually work better than what I was going to do, that actually might keep me safer without injuring me in the process, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then as a whole, the United States doesn't like to take any advice from any other country. For example, the issue of GMOs. Most every other country in Europe has said, no, we want nothing to do with GMOs. But the United States, in its infinite wisdom, says, there's nothing wrong with it. We're going to let it go. And then, of course, there are many, many other examples. But on the local level, the individual level, people are saying, you know what, I'm going to do things differently. I don't care what, this group over here says. To me, when we're talking about life and consciousness, there seems to be that same dynamic, that same paradox, if you will, where there are those who want to stay right where they are. There are even some who want to go back to the way things used to be.
Oh, yeah.
But if you're familiar with the musical group REM and their song, it's the end of the world as we know it. And every moment, it's the end of the world. So is this something, this evolution, is this something that we can escape? Or is some of us going to be dragged, kicking and screaming through that evolutionary process?
Well, first of all, I really like that song.
It is.
One of my favorite, and second, I think it's part of our existence. I think we even each of us, wants to live in a stable world. First of all, because it's safe.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, we live through processes. We keep changing, the world keeps changing, and we have to adapt.
Mm-hmm.
And this conflict is going to be present, I think, for our whole existence. It started when we started as Australopithecus, and they started, and the first Homo started doing, they lived the way they lived, but some individuals found out that using some stones to crack bones was helpful,
Mm-hmm.
and others would say, no. Let's keep digging roots or whatever, But that's it. That is the way, we evolved as a species. See, for example, the advent of writing. That Socrates was very, very reluctant to accept writing and reading, because he thought that knowledge had to be inside our heads. We should not rely on external memories, because that would produce an atrophy, so to speak, in our brains.
Yeah.
Our real intellectual capacities consisted of having, all the information inside our brains, not in books or whatever, and whatever, but at this point, writing and reading really changed the world,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
because it made knowledge accessible to like many people,
It does indeed.
So,
Although there's a wonderful phrase I heard. Truth is only truth until it's written down. Please continue. Please continue.
No, it's just that this conflict is going to be present, throughout our lives. We will always, be dealing between conservativeness and change,
Yeah.
And some people, of course, go to one side better, others go to the other. But I think, the appropriate balance is something that is very, very difficult to find. And it should be, probably somewhere in the middle, so to speak. The best strategy would exist, but finding that out is very difficult, and it will change will depend on the circumstances. It's not that always, you have to be conservative or 70% conservative and 30% innovative, or the other way around, or whatever. It will change depending on the circumstances. So there's no magical rule to come out from that.
Fascinating. Dr. Francis Aboitiz is my guest, and you are listening to Tell Me Your Story. Dr. Aboitiz addresses the neuromechanisms that associated with consciousness, weighing the strengths and limitations. You're going to have to define this one for me, of IIT and GWS. He also raises thought-provoking questions, as we are trying to address here on the program, about the emergence of consciousness in evolution as it presents in non-human animals and artificial systems. We'll talk about that in just a moment. One of the things I found fascinating in my readings, Doctor, in Paramahansa Yogananda's autobiography of a yogi, I was introduced to a gentleman by the name of Jagadish Chandra Bose. Now, I only recently realized he's the same one whose name appears on all that audio equipment these days. I did not know that. But in the 30s, he developed a device called the crescograph. And he would hook it up to a plant. And he would take chloroform on a cloth. And while that plant was hooked up to the crescograph, he would move that cloth close to the plant. And the needles, if you will, on the device would start to drop. And then he'd move the chloroform away and the needles would go back up again. And he would do this several times. This was the experiment, which began to prove that it is possible to measure what is referred to in plants as turgor pressure, the equivalent of blood pressure in humans. That shows that plants very well, and I'm sure there were other experiments as well, very well may have a consciousness, an awareness of self and life. So then that gave me the impetus to then pose to those who are non-meat eaters. Now that you know that plants are alive too, now what are you going to eat? And I just thought that was fascinating, especially when you're talking here about a consciousness in animals as well as artificial systems. I want to get into the AI here in a minute, but there are those who say that animals do not have a soul, which is in reference to consciousness. I think there's a connection between consciousness and the soul.
Yeah.
Is this something that, A, is measurable? And if so, B, do you believe, or has science been able to ascertain whether or not animals have souls? Based upon some of the videos I've seen on TV, where on the internet, where you see these animals running up to humans saying, "Please follow me, follow me, follow me," and it turns out when they do follow this animal, there's another animal, maybe their offspring, in distress. And then when the distress is relieved, the mother, or even the child, if you will, comes back to the human in their way to say thank you for saving me. That, to me, maybe more than implies consciousness. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, first of all, yeah, consciousness is, like I say in the book, I think to me is the most mysterious phenomenon of life. Consciousness is what actually the deep consciousness is. It relates to our sense of existing, of existing, like I feel like I am alive, and this very subjective feeling, you can't communicate to anybody else. You just know it yourself. And that's why I think it's very difficult or impossible to understand it scientifically, because the only one who really observes my consciousness is myself. Nobody else. I cannot observe your consciousness. I infer that you're conscious because we talk, because you tell me things, whatever, we interact, and I consider you equal to me in a way, What happens to our pets? Our pets are the same thing. I mean, we get, emotionally engaged with our pets. And pets, I'm pretty sure, I have 2 dogs and a cat, and I'm pretty sure that they feel hunger, that they feel fear, that they get anger sometimes, angry sometimes, or whatever. I'm pretty sure of that, but I cannot demonstrate it. I cannot scientifically demonstrate it. There are theories of consciousness, like, for example, I will talk about the IIT, Integrated Information Theory, which refers to this kind of consciousness, the experiential consciousness. It's not like the cognitive mechanisms that allow us to be conscious. It's just the feeling of being here and now, And this theory claims that actually a very highly interconnected system, but really highly, like our brain, will be able to reach this level of consciousness. And actually, he has a formula, a very complicated formula, but the formula ends in a number. And this number tells you how conscious you are, from being practically zero in a computer, because the computers do not have this really intrinsic network of intercommunication as our brain has. But on the other hand, a dog or maybe an insect may have a degree of consciousness, and this becomes, like a question like any other. You said people. It's true. People is thinking that plants may be conscious, and there's this argument of pan consciousness, that everything, that consciousness is a property of matter, and what happens is that as complexity builds in, consciousness increases exponentially, but I don't know. I think these views are very difficult to demonstrate, but like in physics, there are many theories that are not yet possible to demonstrate. So they are good. Each is as good as any other, because we don't have to wait a way to verify them.
I was having a conversation with a physicist who wrote a book called The Fifth Dimension. He lives here in Santa Barbara County. And we went to lunch and we were walking back. And he told me, he says, I can prove to you the existence of the first, second, and third dimensions because he can show me height, width, depth. He says, I cannot prove to you the existence of the fourth dimension, which he refers to as time, but I can show you a device that measures it. Doesn't mean that it exists. It's just that from the human standpoint, it measures it. Then he went on to describe for me as we were walking the fifth dimension. And when he was done, we stopped. I looked at him and I said, you do realize that you, as a physicist, you have just described what a lot of people would label with a three-letter word or name, God. Because he says, I can't prove to you it exists, but I can show you, again, the quote unquote instrument, that awareness. My closest awareness to that would be that none of this life makes any sense. For example, there are those who believe that when it's all over, it's lights out. Well, if it is, we're never going to know it anyway. So,
Yeah.
But my logical brain processes my experiences over the 65 years that I've been alive and says, it doesn't make sense that we go through all we go through. You and I sit here having this conversation, pondering consciousness and the evolution of life and all of that. And that's it. And yet we have all of these incredible, what I like to call ancient wisdom teachings that tell us that there is more than this when we leave the body. And there was a beautiful documentary that I saw on death and dying, for example, where they got the permission of this individual and his family. He was terminal, and they placed him on this giant metal table. It was a scale, among other things. It was kind of like one of these tables you see in the morgue.
Yeah.
And what they were going to do was they were going to observe the changes in the body, most specifically the weight of the body at the moment of the last breath of death. And there was a lightening, there was a decrease in the weight of that body at the moment of death. But nothing was expelled from the body physically. There was nothing else on that table that it was like a big giant drain, if you will, or pan. So what left that actually had some substance to it? Now, it couldn't have been the oxygen or the carbon dioxide, I guess, on that last exhale. And that, by the way, that's a rather fascinating thing, talking duality earlier. We will have the same number of inhales as exhales when we do leave this earth. Because the first thing you do when you come into this world, if they do slap you on the butt, you inhale that first breath of oxygen. And at the end, you exhale. I thought that was fascinating. But I thought that was extraordinary that there was actually a drop in the weight of the physical body. So there's something there that does leave that has something, What are your thoughts in that regard?
Yeah. Actually, there's a very good movie. I don't know, it started Champagne, and it was like I don't know, 45 grams or something like that was the name of the movie. It's about someone who dies, but his heart is donated to Champagne, who's a patient who receives this heart.
Mm-hmm.
And he starts, like living the other people's life in a way, and I'm not sure what I can tell you about the process of dying is that there are some experiences that many people feel when they're close to dying, which are called near-death experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these people just don't die, they come back, but they tell these experiences of going through a tunnel, great light, seeing all their lives in like seconds, but it's like a flash of all the experiences he or she has had in his whole life, you know. And these experiences are apparently related to a burst of activity inside the brain, because like you said, I mean, there was this patient who was about to die, and they recorded, I mean, the patient and his family agreed to record his brain activity in the moment of death. And that's what happened. You know, there was a burst of activity, which the researchers think it's coincident with this near death experiences. I'm not sure, you know, about the deep explanation of this, you know, but we do know at this point that there is a pattern of activity associated to the moment of death. Whether this reflects actually this near-death experience, we don't know. And what happens beyond that, we don't know either. You know, it's like I think science cannot answer all things. Science can answer things that are answerable. You know, it's like I can answer things that how much time will it take me to go from here to there, or what can I do to build a bridge, or going to the moon, or curing a disease, or whatever, you know. But I think consciousness is among those things we really cannot talk about. It's like a very, very deep feeling that we cannot, like I said, that we cannot communicate. There was this philosopher, Ludwig Wittgenstein, who said, you know, everything that can be said clearly. And about the other things, we must remain silent, you know. And I think consciousness, I mean, the deep aspect of consciousness belongs to this realm of the things that we cannot explain.
Dr. Francisco Aboitiz is my guest here on the program, and you are listening to Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, and we are having, at least I think it's a fascinating conversation. I hope you folks do, because this is so much fun to ponder these concepts, because this program, Doctor, focuses on more of the metaphysical and esoteric, if you will, the spiritual aspects of life, which encompasses, in my understanding, consciousness. And trying to understand our place in the universe. Now, I've had a number of people, I'm sure you have as well in your life, who have gone on to whatever the next realm is, whether it be nothingness or somethingness. Because nobody's really ever come back. And when I say that, yes, I know about the near-death experience. We've had a number of people on this program who've had them. They claim to have had near-death experiences. There's also a Dr. Newton who conducted LBL tests. It's a hypnosis process of life between lives. Now, I've been in this. I did this with a local practitioner of LBL, and I've also read Newton's studies, a number of his books on the subject. I was fascinated. First of all, I was implicitly trusting of the therapist who conducted the hypnosis, because he never asked leading questions. Now, I was fully conscious of those questions, but it was always, what are you experiencing? Now, there were more specifics to that. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? What are you smelling? What are you tasting? Blah, blah, blah. As opposed to, are you seeing blue? Or are you feeling hot? That's not where he went. He left it up to me to describe. And of course, in those kinds of situations, I have learned over the years that when you're, talking with someone about those kinds of things, that you've never experienced before, the first thing that comes to mind, if you will, you express it, because that is most likely what it is. And I think it's like 70 or 80% accurate in that regard. But then again, how do you know? Because you can't really go there and then come back and report on it other
Exactly.
than through this process.
Exactly.
You have been involved in this aspect of of consciousness for many years, neurocognitive underpinnings, for example, of the conditions such as ADHD, autism, multiple sclerosis, and epilepsy. Talk to us a little bit about that, because this whole thing with ADHD did not manifest until somewhere in the early mid 80s. And I bring this up because when I was a kid growing up, I was taught in biology class that not only are we all individuals, we all have our own personalities and so forth, but boys and girls develop differently, and that boys have more energy and they're going to bounce off the walls, whereas girls not so much. And then in the late 70s and early 80s, I started hearing about how, because they couldn't control the boys specifically, they labeled them with attention deficit disorder or something along those lines, and wanted to, and mostly did, prescribe things like Ritalin to normalize the students. When I was taught, wait a minute, but we're different. That's how we are just biologically. And now you
Yeah.
normalize them. I don't. And so that raises this question. I have to wonder if there are some unintended consequences to our population since then, not just the children who then grew up to be adults, but then their offspring, that is now showing up in our population in other ways. And I'm hoping that there have been some studies done in that regard, that have showed that chemical, those drugs that we fed these kids to normalize them, has maybe changed the chromosomes or their DNA to where now we're dealing with conditions that we never had to deal with before. What are your thoughts?
No, well, first of all, I may be about your age, and I can tell you, I would have been. I mean, if I had been born in 20 years after that, I would have been diagnosed as ADHD for sure. You
Me
know,
too.
but when we were kids, I mean, this wasn't an issue. You know. But there were kids that were more mobile and more distractible than others. And actually, the diagnosis of ADHD is from the early 20th century. It's just that it became more common or more widespread in like in the 80s, like you say.
Mhm.
Actually, I mean, there are genetic relations to ADHD, and I think there's no question that there is a condition, but how how bad, so to speak, is this condition is something that, I mean, I think I've done pretty well with this ADHD thing along with my life, you know.
Mhm.
But there's people who really struggle. There's people who really struggle, actually, uh, and I think treatment for ADHD may help some kids,
Mhm.
may help them not just to normalize it, as you say, but they live better. For example, ADHD kids have a higher risk of developing conduct disorders and substance abuse.
Hmm.
And kids that have been treated, I mean, are a lot more protected than kids that are not treated, you know. So there are some benefits, but like you say, I mean, any medication, you have to be very careful and have a follow-up. And I think, particularly in my country, I think there has been an over medication and an over diagnosis of this condition that is very worrisome, you know. And that's
Yeah,
one of the arguments we have been having with the medical doctors here, because I mean, it should be. I mean, it's clear that some kids really need some help.
sure.
Not all of them, and they really over diagnose them.
Yeah. There's also something else I wanted to talk about in relation to consciousness, and you made the comment earlier about you know uh, 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 going back and looking at things, and feeling like you've been there. Maybe it's a dream, or maybe it is that near death experience, and you feel like you were there for days, weeks, months, or years. I was watching the video that's out. I have the DVD at home, having to do with, I believe it's DHDT or something like that. Ayahuasca is what I'm referring to.
Ayahuasca, yeah, yeah.
Ayahuasca. And
I
of
have
course,
tried that.
you have.
Yeah.
The most extraordinary experience that I saw in the video was of a gentleman who was talking about the experiences that he had. And he felt like he'd been gone for like a year or more. And he's talking about it on to the camera and so forth. And he says, and then I asked, how long was I gone? And they told him, 10 minutes.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Well,
yeah.
ayahuasca is diethyltryptamine, and it's one of the strongest hallucinogenic drugs that there are around. And actually, yeah, it produces a very strong distortion of time and space, a very strong. And not only that, you get, my experience was really, really tough, I would say, because I really, really felt like dismembered at some point,
Oh, wow.
and you lose your notion of bodiness. It's something really, really. It's in a way, to me, it was very creepy at that point. But you know what happened? That after the trip,
Mm-hmm.
I felt so good, so good. I felt like I had been in something that I was enlightened in a way, there was this feeling of feeling so well. And now actually these hallucinogenics, not ayahuasca itself, but the mushroom psilocybin, is being used in microdoses to treat, for example, some mental conditions like major depression and others, because they do produce this sense of well-being in a way,
Yeah.
and actually that's very helpful. Yeah.
That's fascinating. As a kid growing up and going through school, knowing that a lot of my classmates were maybe doing marijuana or other things, that kind of stuff, I never did those things, not because it was illegal or wrong or bad. It just didn't interest me. But when I saw that video of ayahuasca and the experiences that these folks went through in a controlled and safe environment where they had trusted facilitators, I said, you know what? I think I would like to experience that. My wife has said the same thing. And, you know, I remember a story from, I believe it was from Autobiography of a Yogi, where his guru was had his disciples around him, and one of them was trying to test the guru. So he slipped some hallucinogen into his tea or his chai or whatever it was. And of course, the yogi drank it up. And all of a sudden, the one who spiked the tea started to experience the hallucinations. And when he came out, his crew said to him, "You think that that's going to affect me? I'm already where you just went. I'm already there all the time." And I thought, that's fascinating. Now, I know here in the States, they're finally starting to use some of these hallucinogens to help specifically veterans who have been through some horrific stuff. And it's like, it's about, pardon me, it's about damn time that we started helping these men and women after asking them to go through the most horrific things that anyone could ever imagine. I can't even imagine what they might have been. Certainly seen the movies and the television shows, but that's not really experiencing it. It's just, so it's wonderful. And from what I understand, when these hallucinogens were first discovered, because these were all plant-based, they were used in the proper format. They were used in such a way to help people. We're talking hundreds of years ago, maybe
Yeah.
thousands.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they were abused because, like here in the States in the 60s, people just went nuts because they couldn't handle what was happening. I have to wonder what the level of drug use is today in that regard in this country, based upon what's been happening over the last 10 or 12 years politically, if not longer. And of course, as you may also know, marijuana is legal in many, many states, even though it isn't legal yet on the federal level. But it helps people. It really helps people. And it's like, why can't we understand that if we can help people live a normal and healthy life, to begin to start talking about things like what you and I are talking about, consciousness and so forth, why is that wrong?
Yeah.
So to me, it's fascinating. I'm curious about your situation there in Chile in terms of your not only the politics, but even the religion, the faith-based aspect of life in Chile, or maybe in general in South America, by the people that are just going day to day, living their lives, feeding their children, going to work and going on vacations and those kinds of things. Is it any different there than here?
No, I think it's pretty much the same. Still, South America is a strongly religious region, and most of the people is Catholic,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and Catholicism has a long has a big influence in our culture, you know.
Yeah.
So people, I do work in the Catholic University,
Yeah,
so
I noticed that. Yeah.
so which is among the best ones in the country. But yeah, I mean, there's a strong religious feeling in the population,
Hmm.
and when you talk about science, sometimes you do get some conflicts, but usually, at least in my university, they are very, very, open-minded to science and all that.
I find it fascinating, born and raised a Catholic myself, also being introduced to the Eastern Rite of the Catholic Church through my first wife, the Byzantine Rite, as they would call it.
Yeah,
Uh, and what I have noticed in the years that I have sort of was a practicing and now observing what's happening is how, in spite of the fact that there are many, many people who do not want to see any changes, everything is just fine. I've noticed how things have changed within the Catholic Church, whether it's the East or the
it has
West.
changed a lot. It has
Yeah,
changed a lot.
it's incredible. And some of the, I don't want to say edicts, but statements made by the different popes over the last 20,
Yeah,
30, 40 years. It's like, really? You're
yeah,
going to, let me, forgive me for putting it this way. You're going to let those people in, whoever those people are. Well,
yeah.
that's the
Well,
way it should be. Everybody should be allowed to come in.
yeah. Well, the Catholic Church, I think it evolves like any other thing. It's just it is not the same. I mean, you remember? I mean, there were very dark periods, like the period of the Inquisition.
Yeah.
Uh, and I mean, there have been many problems now with priests and sexual abuse and all those things. But I think they are responding in the way they should be doing
Yeah.
it. Huh?
Before we wrap things up here, I would like to talk a little bit about AI, uh,
Yeah,
as well as one other thing. The There was a movie with Brad Pitt where he had his, we'll put it this in this context, he had his consciousness imprinted into a computer.
yeah,
And it was fascinating how the evolution that he went through as a non-human, non-physical entity in essence, although now he could access anything and everything on the globe through the internet. Um, and a lot of people are afraid of AI. And the way it's been described to me is there's nothing to fear because AI isn't using anything more than the information that we give it,
Yeah.
and that it can't really create of its own accord. It can only create using what we have given it, which puts this question, and I think, correct, you may know this. There was a philosopher or a psychiatrist, psychologist, what have you. I think it was Jung who made this statement, as far as human beings are concerned, that there is only one mind and that we are all part of that one mind. So when you think about AI, it is only one mind. And now it's separate from the human mind, if you will, that I just mentioned. But it only contains that which we give it, the information that we choose to allow it to have access to. Is in your perspective, is there a fear that we should have of AI? Should we be concerned? And I put this question to you: just because we can, does that mean we should?
Yeah. Well, first of all, yeah, I think AIs are not conscious because they lack biology. I think consciousness is the result of biology somehow that we don't understand really well. But if you tell me, a cell is conscious, we could argue about that. But an AI, I'm not so sure. I'm really skeptical about that possibility, even though it behaves as if it was. It simulates consciousness very well, because you can talk to an AI, and tell him. I mean, there are even there are these programs that work as a psychotherapy using AI, and the person trusts the AI and tells it his life or whatever, it's. I mean, they seem to be conscious, but I don't think the wiring allows them to be conscious. But uh, I think the main danger of AI is its use.
Mm.
It's the
There
way
was,
we are going to be using it.
yeah,
I
there
think
was a
that's the
movie that
main
came out in the
problem.
70s. I don't know if you remember this movie that came out in the 70s called War Game or War Games. And the Soviet Union and the United States basically went to war on the screen through the computers. And this young kid was able to figure out that that was what was happening. And if I remember, I honestly, I can't remember the conclusion. All I know is it turned out that the computer was doing nothing more than playing a game, but the adults, the humans, thought it was real.
Yeah, I don't think the computer will know much. It will do just whatever its algorithms allow it to do. I don't think computers have any knowledge like we do, you know. But they can manage, a lot more information that we can, and that's why you have this Chat GPT. That I mean, I just read an article that actually some scientists say, we will not need to have any to write any more reviews about topics because you just put one of those AI programs and they just give you the review in seconds,
Yeah.
and so you don't have to. I mean, publishing a review is like useless at this point. Some people say that, some others don't. But you know, but I think the problem with AI is that it makes decisions. You know,
Okay.
and these decisions may be biased by whoever programs it. You know, so those decisions may be, for example, discriminating people on the terms of the religion or race or whatever, or gender or whatever. And I think that's one of the biggest problems of AI.
Now, I hope that this never happens to me because I know it has happened to a lot of people across the globe where they have their identity stolen, that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
I share an
That's
awful lot about myself on this program.
mm,
And my perspective is, as one who does believe that there is maybe it's divine. I don't know if it's the force, a creator, an intelligence, if you will, or it may be all of us collectively.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
reality is that if, let's just say, there is that entity, all right, and the ancient wisdom teachings say that it's omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, it already knows everything about me.
yeah,
And the 8.5 billion people on the planet, most of them don't care. So, what difference does it make if people know, oh, yeah, I had my gallbladder removed not long ago? Did I just violate the HIPAA rules? No, because I had my it was mine, and I can share that story. However, if you had your gallbladder removed and I knew it and I started telling people about it, I've just crossed the line.
yeah. Well, that is what happens with what's been happening with social media. All your privacy, is just, I mean, in danger. You
Yeah.
know, that's why I'm very reluctant to, with whatever I put in my pages in Instagram or
Mhm.
Facebook or whatever, because I mean, these programs are really, really taking information from all of us, in the favor of the builders of
Yeah.
these programs.
What I find fascinating, and again, my heart goes out to those families who lost everything in the wildfires in Los Angeles in January 2025.
Yeah,
But that being said, we came into this world with nothing, and we cannot, regardless of what Steve Martin said back in the 70s, that he's taking it with him. You can't take it with you. Okay. And again, I don't wish to be insensitive, but the reality is that when my wife and I were evacuated one time out of 18 years, we were evacuated from our home here in Santa Barbara. And a part of me was thinking, you know what? I don't care if it all goes. Yeah, I'll miss some of it initially, and I wish I had backed this up and done that and so forth. But you know what? I can't take it with me, you know? And and then we have to, and it's kind of like what you said at the front end of the program. We adapt. And that's what we do as humans. We adapt.
yeah, we adapt, exactly. That's what life is. Yeah.
Exactly. Dr. Francisco Aboitiz is my guest, and you are listening to a program that is talking about his work. I love this one, A Brain for Speech, a view from evolutionary neuroanatomy, as well as another book that we're talking about here today in regards to life and consciousness and the evolution thereof, A History of Bodies, Brains, and Minds. And we are here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I want to thank you so much for this very interesting, at least to me, very interesting conversation about this subject. There's still so much more we could touch upon that we didn't get to. You've been very prolific as far as in your scientific articles, and of course, these two books that I mentioned earlier. And I really appreciate you giving us so much time, all the way from Chile here on the program. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Richard. It was a great conversation.
I do have three final questions for you that I ask all of my guests. But before I do, I want to thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story. New Paradigms for a New World. We're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and streaming live at those times at richarddugan.com. And we're also here Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific time. We podcast on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, as well as on YouTube, where you can watch these conversations, and we hope that you will. We'll also hope that you'll subscribe and click notifications, so when I post a new conversation, well, of course, you'll be notified. I want to remind you that Choices, 5 Steps for Life is available at Amazon. It is available in hard copy, paperback, as well as Kindle with Audible coming soon. And then we ask that if you can support the work that we are doing financially, we would be gratefully appreciative. I thank you, thank you, thank you to those who have helped and to those who will help. Use the email address richard@richarddugan.com if they should ask you. But if you go to the link on the homepage of richarddugan.com, there's a link to take you to Amazon. There's also a link to take you to PayPal as well. And finally, we ask that you take some time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to spend some time going within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place. We didn't quite get to that, Doctor, but maybe the next time we'll get together and talk about listening to that still small voice. Maybe we'll do that. And with all of that, we'd go to our final three questions for a very special guest. And that first question is, who is Francis Aboitiz?
Who am I? I am a person who's really interested in and passionate about what life is, and about what is it to be a human, and how we have come about. I also like wine, food. I like doing some sports. I also like those things, but and I love my family and all my pets and all that. I think what moves me, or what has been moving me throughout my life, is that
What gets
passion
you up
about life.
What gets you up in the morning?
Well, I start every morning. First of all, I start doing my gym. First thing. That's how I start. I also wake up my kids. I bring them to school, but then just gym.
And finally, what was your best day
in my life? Oof. That's a different question. That's a very different question. I should say when I married my second wife. I think that was a good day. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Doctor, thank you so much for the time that you've given us here on the program, and thank you again for being here. We hope to have you back to talk further about this, because again, we could go for hours. There's no question about it. And I thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to Lal. Jeanette, I am still listening. Dad, continue to be happy, because I am. Smokey, I will see you on the other side. Mike, thanks for letting me be in your life. And to my dear friend Zorro, aho, aho.